Classy around here. We use coasters. All right, let's get into this. Put a thing on the thing. Oh, hold on there. Get on down. Here we go. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Black Power Media broadcast of the Rational Radicals. And I know the word radicals is a scheduling conflict. So he will be here. He tried to get, I ain't gonna tell his business. He intends to be here. He tried to get here on time, but he's running a little late. He just texted me a couple of seconds ago. So Skipp, I know y'all been missing Skipp, and let me see. Yeah. All right. He said he'll be here, but he just won't be on time. So Skipp, y'all know he's accepted Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior. So we'll use their terminology. Skipp may not get here when we want him, but he'll be here right on time. Okay, brothers and sisters? All right. Okay, let's get started. Let's get it started. I don't really have any announcements as of right now. I hope everyone had a good couple of weeks. My week has been going pretty bad. Let me not even lie. But I've told myself I'm not going to indulge myself and use these broadcasts as my own personal therapy sessions or venting. But times have been hard on the boulevard, I must admit. We've been having some issues, and we've been having some contractors to deal with to try to abate those issues. And we've had to accommodate and make some adjustments. And it's been messing with my sleep. And when you mess with my sleep, you mess with my emotions. And so it's been a little shaky for me, but I'm getting it together. I'm pulling it together. And I think things are going to be better going forward, going into the fall. Both of my sons will start back to school next week. So that's always good. Shout out to the youth, the young Black youth that are going back to school. And that's that, So anyway, today's topic was something that's been hitting me for quite some time. And I'm just going to get into it and hopefully, I don't know, why y'all announcing other people's business? What they got to do with me? What's happening here and now? But yeah, shout out to the Remix Morning Show, man. They really getting names. They getting names. They about to rival the Breakfast Club. So they getting some significant individuals, thought leaders. But anyway, yeah, y'all tune into the Remix Morning Show. Sometimes, I'm able to tune in. It's always fun and interesting and delightful and engaging and interesting, all that. So I'm done bigging up my colleagues. All right, so we call in the Midwest. I'm done jeffing with other shows. This here is my show, and this here is my time. So if you want to big up other folks, it's fine as long as y'all go on to the morning show and get in the comments and say, oh, Earn Your Liberation and the Bro Diallo Show and the Rational Radicals. As long as y'all name dropping me and they stuff, y'all name dropping them in here, because it's a cooperation. It's not a competition. Anyway, I want to talk about war. And we all love the subject of war. I, for one, am a big fan of studying war and conflicts, major conflicts, relatively obscure conflicts. Some of my favorite, most engaging history is not just the lead up to the wars, but the ideology, the methods, the instruments of war, the techniques, the individuals of war. I play war games. I play Age of Empire, and I play several video games with war. My son once came to me and embarrassed me one time, my youngest son, and said, Dad, do you play any video games that you're not required to use a gun? And I could answer that question, but the only video games that I play that I'm not required to use a gun, I usually have some other instrument of warfare or attack. So I couldn't really, I played Lovers in a Dangerous Space Time, but that even has guns. So I said no, because he plays video games like Coffee Talk and puzzle games. He played this game called Oxenfree. I tried to play it. I couldn't get through the first few minutes. So I play war games from chess to video games. One of my favorite real-time strategy games is one of my favorite types of games, real-time strategies. I love Dawn of War and all of the iterations of Dawn of War. So I love real war. I don't love real war. I actually hate war, but I'm virtually fascinated by war, and I love virtual warfare, from the comic books to video games, to real-time strategy games, to tabletop games. um I'm fascinated by war. Now there are certain theories about male primates, males of the species, and warfare, high levels of testosterone, and how young males in particular, grow up playing war. I've played war as a child. We literally had a game called War, and we'd spend half the day constructing weapons from twigs and sticks and rubber bands and yarn. If you grew up in East Hills Village, housing projects, and we'd make bolo whips and all kind of stuff, and we'd engage in war. And one of my favorite games was War, a game where we take a football and throw it up in the air, and there were no teams. It was every man for himself. You throw the ball in the air, and you'd have to scramble to grab the ball and run it into either end zone, and you'd score. And that was one of my favorite games. And once someone scored, you go back to the middle of the field and throw the ball up in the air, and everyone be standing around the ball in anticipation, and you grab it, and everybody pile up on you. You'd relinquish the ball, and we start again. So I've always been fascinated in war, studied war, played at war, and I've also have a distinct hatred of warfare and violence. I don't even like calling it war, real world war, World War I, World War II, the Vietnam War, which was not a war, it was an invasion, it was an atrocity. We're going to get into that, but some of these things we call war isn't even war. In fact, most of the armed conflicts that we call war are not wars, do not classify or meet the definition or the bar for being an actual war, but we call them war anyway because it's good for Western white propaganda. But I call wars mass murder orgies because that's what they generally come down to. If you study war, there's an old saying that truth is the casualty, is the first casualty of war. Truth is the first casualty of war. But often the second casualty of war, they never talk about because the war is never, you can't have a war with just one casualty. The second casualty of war is the very motivations or the very purpose for engaging in war. That quickly becomes moot. When you engage, when you study most warfares, you'll find that the motivations for engaging in war often gets erased almost the moment the first cannon, the first missile, the first arrow is shot from a bow. And it happens so often that there's a official terminology for when a war, the very stated purpose of the war, of a conflict, is erased or changed. It's called mission creep. Now, if you're my age, you've lived through quite a few wars, Gulf Wars, and the war in Panama, and the war on terror, the war on drugs. You've lived through quite a few wars. But if you look at it, let's take the most vivid war that the United States, the so-called war on terror, which was not a war, but let's play pretend. Let's have some fun. But if you look at their stated goals, let's even narrow it down because that's pretty broad. When they went into Afghanistan, they went in there to capture the people who committed the 9/11 crimes, which was an absolute lie going into it. That was an absolute lie. In fact, the governing body of Afghanistan said, listen, if you want it, you give us a list of the people that you believe within our borders that have participated in this crime, and we will turn them over to you. But they put a caveat in that. Oh, I've done paintball. Yeah, I love paintball. In fact, me and Q was supposed to get paintball, slingshot paintball, the slingshot shootout going again here in Chicago, man. We still got a little time left here in Chicago before it turns into a winter wonderland, but holla at me, Q. We can get a couple of sessions off and then do it big for the next season. But I digress. They said, "Oh, we're going in there uh to just capture these criminals." It was a police action, and the Taliban said, "Listen, you want these people? Give us your list, but we also, along with that list of fugitives or suspects, we want evidence. Give us your evidence. You send us all these names, and then send us your evidence as to what will justify you taking these people into custody, and we will turn them over to you." And the United States said, "We don't negotiate with terrorists." And we said, and the Afghan government said, "That's great. I'm glad you don't negotiate with terrorists, but do you negotiate with other sovereign nations? Do you negotiate with other diplomats? Do you negotiate with other heads of states?" And they were like, "Well, you're all terrorists." So they went in there to capture criminals, and it turned in, they went in there and said, "Well, the whole country is we're going to topple this wicked government. We're going to free women. We're going to bring democracy. Now we can't pull out because we want to prevent the rise of and every couple of months throughout the invasion of Afghanistan, they kept changing the rationale and motivations for the war. Same thing with the Iraq war. Same thing. The same thing, believe it or not, with World War II. First of all, the United States says, "Hey, just like World War I, we are going to be," they called it Western entanglements. The politicians at that time, mothers were saying, "We don't want our children going overseas to die in entanglements." Because World War I was a regional war. It wasn't a world. Europe ain't the goddamn world. Europe ain't even a continent. But they went over there and said, "Well, we must stop fascism. We must stop fascism." And they went over there to fight fascism. And by the time they came back, they were fighting communists. And the communists were the number one ally. The number one ally of the Western allied powers was the communists. And you see Stalin sitting on the stage right next to the U.S. president, the FDR, and they're sitting there homies, dapping each other up. And the U.S. military left as an ally of the communists and came back as the number one enemy of the communists. Mission creep. And to this day in the world, and to this day, the U.S. militaries don't want to be insensitive to people who have this affliction, but the U.S. military is like herpes. Once the U.S. military gets into your country, you can't get them out. The U.S. military is still in Germany. The U.S. military set up in Germany in World War II, and they never left. Korea. The U.S. military is still in South Korea. U.S. military is still in Vietnam. Remember, we pulled out of Afghanistan? Just go look up how many U.S. troops. Remember, they pulled out of Iraq. United States is out of Iraq. The United States is out of Afghanistan, but they still got troops on the ground. Still got troops on the ground. The United States has over 200 military bases all over the world. The U.S. has more military bases than countries. U.S. military has a base in Cuba, Guantanamo Bay. The United States went to Guantanamo Bay, set up a military base, and Cuba said, "Get the fuck off our country. Get off our territory." So the United States is like, "Nah, you're going to lease this land, this foothold in your country. We're going to lease this to us, and we're going to give you a check. We're going to pay you rent." And over the last 60 plus years, the Cuban government has never cashed any of those checks. Can you imagine that? Somebody kicks in your door, in your home, and goes to one of your rooms and be like, "Yeah, this is nice. I'm going to set up here. And not only am I going to set up in your room, I'm going to bring these people that I claim were some of the worst, most vicious criminals from around the world, and I'm going to tie them up and keep them in a room in your house." And you'd be like, "The hell you is? Get out of my house." Like, "Nah, I'm going to give you rent. And if you come in this room, I will kill you. In fact, if you come in this room of your house, I'm going to burn your whole motherfucking house down. Try me." So, just to say, war is always irrational, it's never logical, and it's seldom if ever, necessary or justified. But it is ubiquitous. The majority of the resources, if you live in the United States of America, or if you live almost anywhere else in the world, the majority of your resources, of your labor and your effort goes towards warfare. Why do I say that? The line item budget, the biggest part of the American budget is war. So everything, for every dollar, depending on what field you're in, for every dollar you pay into the government, between 45 to 65 cents of that dollar goes into the military. If you live overseas, the United States is more likely than not taking the lion's share off top of your country's natural resources. And even if your country does no direct trade with the United States, because of the U.S. imperial status, international trade is done in U.S. dollars. So if you have a country with your own currency and you want to engage in trade on an international level, you have to convert your sovereign currency into dollars, make the trade or make the purchase, and then convert it back to your national currency. So even if you say, I don't want nothing to do with the United States, I don't want nothing to do with the U.S. empire, I don't want U.S., even if you ain't got U.S. troops on your soil, and over 200 military bases throughout Latin America, throughout Africa. They even have U.S. military weapons in the stratosphere, satellites, oceans. They have mobile weapons platforms, from aircraft carriers to nuclear subs. The United States has the whole world surrounded with weapons. And even if you say, I don't want nothing to do with this, I don't live in the United States, I'm not a U.S. citizen, I don't ever intend to go to the fucking U.S., I fuck Disneyland, I ain't trying to do nothing, you're still, by force, even if you live in Europe, even if you say, well, that's for them colored folks, that's for the Caribbean, Central Americans, the Africans, the Asians, they don't have the intelligence or the power to fight off. But I live in Italy. I live in the UK. I live in neutral Switzerland. And then y'all still got to kick into the U.S. war machine. So we're all full participants in this mass murder orgy and the U.S. war machine. And after, because it's really weird now, people are talking about a multipolar war. A multipolar world, which I don't see evidence of a multipolar world, because when two capitalist nations fight for global dominance, then I think we're still fucked. If you don't have a non-imperialist, non-capitalist, liberationist, revolutionary government fighting against the West, then then it's not a multipolar world. And black people, we've been through this shit too many times. Various white factions murdering each other in mass, and we picking sides between white racist factions. Black people sat in this country, enslaved, and then we said the British and the colonists are going to war. Two groups of white people about to beat the shit out of each other. And black people were like, well, some black people were like, I'm an American. Christmas addicts bullshit. And we gonna go posse up with the white man and show the white man that we are indeed are we not his brother. Some of us fought with the British, and the British said, hey, if I win against the colonists, I'm gonna free all you colored folks. And we split up. We took sides in a white conflict. And what happened? The British left. They took the black people who fought with the British and dumped them in Nova Scotia and went back to doing their imperialist business. And the white folks, history is written. And then white folks had a civil war. And I know the vast majority of black folks fought with the North. Makes sense, logical. All praise is due to our ancestors. Respect and honor their sacrifice. But there were some Negroes who fought with the Confederates back then and today. But what did they do? White folks had a murder orgy. Then they sat and negotiated, and the North betrayed the African allies. The British betrayed their African allies. The colonists betrayed the African allies. The Southern Confederates betrayed the African allies. The Northern Unionists betrayed the African allies. World War I, same thing. We went overseas to face down the Huns. We went overseas to face down the enemies of democracy, only to come back to lynching. World War II, the same thing. We came back to lynching, and we didn't even get our pension. We didn't even get our cut of the GI Bill. Couldn't even get that into the housing programs and the health programs. Same thing in Vietnam. Black soldiers were overrepresented on the front lines, overrepresented in the death toll, overrepresented in all the negative aspects, and underrepresented in all the benefits. But yet and still, we still enlisting, volunteering. I mean, the brothers in Vietnam, at least they had to threaten them brothers. Now we got brothers volunteering, enlisting. I lost a grant from the city of Chicago because part of the program I was running had a very strong anti-enlistment. I was working with 16, 17, and 18-year-old Black males and females. And I don't know if you know this, but in the Chicago public schools, and I only got one son. I had graduated one son from the Chicago public schools, and I got another one, still there, and just went to his what was it? Family Appreciation Day or back to school celebration or something. They had a bunch of bouncy houses and little tables, meet the teachers, meet the new staff members, go over the curriculum. But the fucking military recruiters were there. They had a fucking tent in full military regalia. But anyway, I lost it because I was, would take the people aside as they were graduating and looking into schools and trying to figure out how these poor Black kids, how they were going to pay for school. And the military was right there. You go to the military, you learn skills, and you get tuition paid, get bonus, and you get the honor and pride of serving in your country. And I'm like, man, let me tell you something. I ain't got to tell y'all, but I gave them a message, and I did get a couple of young Black youth to not enlist. I've even had some parents that were outraged at me because they wanted their children to enlist, and one day you send your child off to learn urban agriculture and sustainable practices and organic food cultivation, and they come home and they're anti-American, they're anti-military, and they telling you, I ain't enlisting, we're gonna have to find some other way to pay for school. So I can relate to what those parents did. But anyway, they were like, nah, it's time to wrap this whole program up. And I'm like, so be it. Anyway, where are we? I'm trying to kill time. But anyway, let's proceed. Anyway, just to tell you, I am repulsed by war, but I'm also fascinated by war. Now, me, I can never go to actual war. I always ask the question, imagine a world where no man ever killed another man because some other man told him to do so. I can imagine myself engaging in violence for a myriad of reasons. I'm not a pacifist. I'm nonviolent. My go-to position on all things is to achieve my goals non-violently, and if there is potential for violence, I try de-escalation. But there are several scenarios I can imagine, not just engaging in violence, but enthusiastically engaging in violence. But one reason I will never fucking engage in violence or advocate for violence or validate violence is, number one, because some motherfucker with a higher rank than me told me to. And number two, for a nation. Fuck the nation. Seriously. Fuck the nation. And I know some of y'all Black nationalists go to war. You don't go to war for Africa. It is not appropriate or doesn't make sense to go to war for Africa. You go to war for Africans. Now, I don't know. I'm going to miss some. I'm going to lose some people with that. because we're so wrapped up in this nationalistic, fervor and so on and so forth. These glasses are filthy. This ain't gonna clean. I had to wear glasses, man. That's a little better, a little more better. I ain't got the wipes. Anyway, but let me not get into that because I know I'm gonna get some push. Diallo won't fight for Africa. So anyway, let's talk about the topic: war in the United States. I think people throw around the word war too casually. Oh, this is war. We going to war. I'm ready to go to war. A lot of gang war. I think people throw around the word war too casually. And I think people even are too quick to talk about violence and taking other people's lives way too casually. I think Black people, we're very keen on Eurocentrism amongst Black people. People, I get called Eurocentric. I tell people, well, I'm a vegan. Oh, that's white. That's Eurocentric. I tell people I'm atheist. Oh, that's white. That's Eurocentric. I tell my people I'm socialist. Socialism is the white man. I get called Eurocentric a whole bunch of lot. And I say I'd like to hear your argument. And to the extent that it used to be, if somebody would tell me something is Western or white or Eurocentric, I used to give weight to that. But now I hear that thrown around. Anything, if I, as a Black, conscious, militant Black man, anything that you want. Oh, hold on. How do I turn off these notifications? I don't know. Anyway, that's Jared in them. And Eurocentric. And so I'm like, if you want to criticize a position that I take, or you want me to reconsider a position or change or abandon a position, simply calling it Eurocentric is not enough. It's not enough. I have to hear some specific arguments or give some evidence that I can dissect and observe myself. I need a rational argument or evidence. Simply a denunciation of it being Eurocentric is not enough. But I do say there are certain Western ideologies, Western points of views, Western values that we have casually integrated, we have adopted within the Black masses that are all but invisible to us. So if a Black person comes up and says, well, I'm a Christian and the Lord, Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. It's like, well, Christianity is Eurocentric. It's white. And people will say, well, so is veganism. So I can simply say, well, we know the origins of Christianity. We know the values. We know the point of view. We know the woo. So certain things we observe are Western. Certain things we understand are Western. And we understand that certain things we who are members of the African diaspora, particularly the African diaspora who live within the United States, who hold U.S. citizenship, who've been here, whose ancestry goes all the way back. Way back. My family name is Jefferson. I ain't never met a white Jefferson. Every Jefferson I ever met is Black. Same goes for Washington, Jackson. But anyway, one of the Eurocentrisms that I see Black people have blindly adopted without even question or debate is bloodlust. I see Black people have a bloodlust. Like, I'll see a headline. And it could be a horrible crime, a crime against children. Let me turn off these notifications right real quick, because there we go. I'll see it could be a crime against children or a horrendous multiple murder or a senseless violent crime. And Black people will immediately get online and be like, kill them, death to them, burn them. Kill them. Don't even kill them before they get to jail. Death, death, death. As if an appropriate punishment, an appropriate sanction for a crime is to murder the criminal, even before a trial, even before the person has any opportunity to provide their defense. Black people calling for death. I see black people online flaunting their arsenals, their weapons, and not just displaying their weapons or demonstrating their capacity to use those weapons, but they go into these scenarios and fantasies. Somebody try to carjack me. If somebody comes in my house, if a nigga step to me, and literally creating heroic, triumphant fantasies about killing other people. And so tying, fusing, merging their very self-identity, their masculinity, their status, their worthiness to be a man, their worthiness to be the head of the family, and tying that directly to their capacity and will to kill another person. The person does not even exist. I know people that will sit and tell me about how they have these. Now, I know people who have taken other people's lives. I've met people who just recently, less than 24 hours after they've taken another person's life. I've worked in a trauma center. I worked in Rikers Island Prison Infirmary. I've been to Leavenworth, and I worked the infirmary at Leavenworth Federal Prison. Like I said, I've worked level 1 trauma centers. And I grew up in the inner city. So I know people who took lives decades ago. I know people who have taken lives, and I've interacted with them minutes ago. And by and large, that all the bravado fades away. Even those who were justified, who had their heroic moment, who were able to show and prove, fuck around and find out type dudes. Somebody was trying to harm my family. Somebody was trying to take my property. And I justifiably used the necessary level of violence to defend myself, my loved ones, and my property. And all the bravado I see online, all of the triumphant position, all of the self-assurance and confidence, it's gone. I mean, in their eyes, it's gone. And I think it's so both unfortunate that it had to happen, but to me, it did give me a certain level of confidence. It did give me a certain level of confidence that, humanity is still humane despite our indoctrination, despite the cultural contaminations of living in a death cult of Western culture. Western culture has a death urge. It has an obsession and a lust for death. I say all the time, there's so many terms and concepts in their language where the most intimate act, sexual intercourse, and the most violent act of taking another person's life, the same words, fucking, we even say, people started calling ejaculating inside of a woman shooting up the club. Knocking down walls. I mean, some of the most violent language translate into some of the most intimate acts between two people. There are so many words or phrases that can be confused as sexual innuendo or a violent threat or a violent assault. And that's been the case in this culture, Western, going back to the Greeks. Some archaeologists will even go back to the nomadic European tribes. Captain Caveman. The concept, we all familiar with the thing hitting a woman over the head with a club and dragging her away. And going back to the earliest folklore, myths, and history, that always, without exception, the spoils of war, women are spoils of war. The ability to sexually ravage the women of the losing tribe or the losing nation has been one of the realities going back to biblical time, where God gave the edict that once you conquer these people, you kill all the men, the children, the male children under the age of puberty. You can kill them or take them as slaves and eunuchs. For the women, all women with children, kill them. All women who didn't have children but had known a man, had intercourse with a man, finish them. But those women who have not yet had a menstrual cycle or who are not yet been deflowered, you can take them as your wives, concubines, or slaves. And I will challenge you. And I already know you're going to lose this if you take this challenge. Find one major armed conflict that was not married to massive systematic sexual assault of women, children, and even other men. Name one. Name one that did not involve the targeting of women, going even in the targeting of the genitals, the mutilation of the genitals. It got so bad that during the Vietnam War, the returning soldiers would have to be pat down and they were searched because the soldiers were cutting off noses, ears, lips, and genitals, male and female genitals, and trying to smuggle them back into the U.S. as trophies. What the fuck that got to do with fighting off communism? What that even fucking got to do with taking over oil fields? But war always involves not only hyper sexual aggression, but systemic wide unbreach. And it's not just the opposing nation. There's a book called Oversexed, Over... It's not just the enemies. It's not just the enemies. Oh, that book. Damn, it's still $30? That old ass books? This is the copy I have. I really don't like to show Amazon shit, but just for brevity. Why ain't it showing it? Nope. Here we go. It's right here. Overpaid, oversexed over here. The American GI in World War II Britain. So the U.S., it wasn't just the women, the Nazi or German women who were victims. They were going after, and this book tells in Dia, overpaid, oversexed over here, how after, because you know the U.S., they pretend like the U.S. defeated Hitler. The United States held back on that war and came in at the tail end to claim the victory. But when the U.S. went over there, Western Europe had already been experienced almost a decade of ongoing conflict. European women were on the verge of starvation. Many of them had been living in squalor because the infrastructure had been totally destroyed and disrupted. This was the first major industrial modern war, and the women were extremely desperate. And the U.S. troops went over there and were, same thing they're doing in Haiti, the same thing NATO did in Haiti. Same thing. You want this moldy bread? You want these provisions? Even though the provisions, they would say, well, we're going to send these relief and provisions. We're going to airdrop these supplies. And the men with guns would gather them all up and go to white women and say, hey, come spend the night in the barracks and we'll send you home with some millet and grain for your family. They do this to their own. These are white folks. These are Americans with Europeans. These are Americans with British. Forget what they did to the Italian women who were the enemy, the German women who were the enemy, the Japanese women who were the enemy. Look at what they did to their own fucking allies. Go look up sexual assault and rape within the U.S. to this day. West Point Military Academy. They have unaddressed pandemic of sexual assault within the military. And it's not just women. There are entire military units whose initiation ritual involve sexual assault, sodomizing other male soldiers. But I digress. All I'm trying to drive home is that sexual predation is always present in war and conflict. But anyway, let's come out of that dark place. But I mean, we got to know this. Don't allow your children to enlist in the U.S. military, and hella don't let your daughters enlist in the U.S. military. By and large, if she is a victim of harassment and assault, she's more likely to be sanctioned and punished than her attacker. I don't know what black folks do. And I know I got a 21-year-old. I got an adult son. I know you can't tell your child nothing. Whatever my son get out here and do crazy, I can rest on the fact that, hey, I told him what I knew to tell him. I told him what I knew to tell him. Atrocity. Anyway, so warfare. We live in a perpetual war state. The United States is in a perpetual war economy. The United States has been in perpetual war since the founding of this country. The country was founded on genocide and conquest. It is still engaged in ongoing genocide against the natives. It's really curious to me every time I see some formal apology coming from local or federal government to the Native Americans, or some tacit acknowledgement of the evils of the past and the overreaches of the past. And it's so fucking funny to me because you're still doing it today. How you going to apologize for something you're in the midst of doing? Like you're literally choking someone to death and you're like, so sorry. Pardon me. You know, I'm sorry for the choking I did 10 minutes ago, but the choking I'm doing now, I'll apologize for that down the line. United States, there are Native Americans still in the United States. Those Native Americans are still living on some of the most polluted and toxic lands. The Native Americans have the shortest life expectancy in the country, highest suicide rate in the country, and they have an even higher incarceration rate per capita in percentages per capita than black people. And it just blows my mind because you got a lot of confused and self-hating, self-rejecting black people say, I'm Indian. And I'm like, you want to play Indian. You want to call yourself a native, an aboriginal. Take your ass to the Lakotas. Take your ass to so-called Indian country, to the sovereign native nations. I can tell 90% of these black people who claim they got Indian in their family ain't been nowhere near. I've set foot on a reservation. The squalor, the despair. Y'all don't want no parts of that. And I think because white folks do it too. There's whole populations of white people who claim to be native too. The fucking Mormon, the whole Mormon church is mythology is that the true natives were white people, and actually the red Indians came and displaced the white Indians. The Europeans, or the white people, were the true Native Americans, and then they were Christian too, because Jesus came to the New World, and then the red man, the godless heathen, demonic red man, came and colonized white people. So black people ain't the only people claiming native, falsely claiming native blood or to be Native Americans. But for those populations that do falsely claim their identity, you are aiding in their erasure, and you are a co-conspirator. I won't go that far, especially for you ignorant, self-hating black people. But you are hurting the cause. If you do really have respect or reverence or concern or attachments or any type of emotional attachment for Native Americans or for their First Nations heritage, instead of pretending, instead of dressing up and going to the sweat lodge and trying to front like you are Native, Why don't you highlight the genocide and join them in the fight against the genocide of their culture as opposed to falsely claiming their culture? But I digress. Let's talk about war. You know, my entire life, as long as I have memory, because we talked about war, there's several wars that I could talk about. I could talk about the policy wars, the war on terror, the war on poverty, the war against crime, the war on illiteracy. I mean, these motherfucking Urugos, all they can do, if any issue, is to wage war against it. Even the problems. I mean, I'm waiting for these goddamn fucking Urugos to have a war against war. There's too many wars. We're going to have a war to end war because that's all they can do. And it ain't because it's just that's all they can think of. You know, if I can't shoot it, if I can't beat it to death, what can I do? That's essential to their culture. And here we just mad casual about this shit. We just participating. Black people out here, yeah, Second Amendment. We just want to be black cowboys. We just want to be down with these people, right? But there's several wars, world wars, policy wars, a culture war, which I'm really sick of that culture wars. But I decided to focus on three manifestations of war for it: class war, race war, which I've been talking a lot about lately, and civil war. Civil war. Now, resource wars, it's kind of, I wouldn't really call it's a bit redundant to say resource war, because all wars have basically three components in it, and that's power, position, and resources. All wars, even though people claims we're going to war to protect democracy, we're going to war to save the women of Afghanistan from the burqa, we're going to war to speak to an insult. They insulted our monarch, so we're going to go to war for the honor of the monarch. We're going to go to war. But an essential component to wars, whether they publicly stated or not. So every war is a war about power, position, and resources, no matter what they say. So that's a component in all wars. So saying resource war is like saying war. You don't have war that is not couched around resources, because war not only requires a great mobilization of resources, there is also a taking of resources and the claiming of resources. So resource wars, as someone had mentioned, yeah, there are so-called resource wars, but what war isn't a resource? Well, I mean, power, position. And when I say position, I do mean physical position, territory, power, land, and resources, maybe you could say. But land is really, it's a little bit more than just land, because there's like airspace. It's not land, because if you say power, land, and resources, you know, these motherfuckers are fighting over water. You know, like, oh, this is our territorial water. This is our airspace. You can't come into our, they was just talking about that Chinese weather balloon. Air, you know, they're fighting over fucking moon rights and access to moon and Antarctica. They are fighting about underground shit that's under the ground that moves around. So there's a lot of war, resource, and a lot of positions. Like, where will we stand? What position do we stand on this physical plane and non-physical plane? The leader of the free world, defender of democracy, that's a position. The global police. What the fuck? Even worse. Whatever. Just got a fine in my face. So anyway, I decided to kind of distill it down to class, race, and civil war, because civil war, I'm hearing a lot of rhetoric about. Race war, you don't really hear it as much. People aren't as comfortable as even saying the word race war. And class war, which you never speak of in the United States, even though it is the top war. So I'm going to talk about these three wars in the United States, and then we're going to go into open it up. I'm going to share the link. You have Q&A, questions, comments, criticism. I'll engage with y'all. But before I say that, support. Where's the thing? That's all personalized. They don't have like a general support. Oh, here we go. BlackPowerMedia.org. Click, like, share, and subscribe. Do the thing. Put the thing on the thing. Do the thing. Become a subscriber and support Black Power Media. You know, we want to be like, they got Fox News. This is Panther News. Fox eat a panther. Anyway, let's get into it. Let's deal with the first war, race war. Now, no one in the United States who has any comprehension or understanding of race in the United States or war. And I have to also say this, war is not purely military. You can have, and even they say there's up to 4 to 5 manifestations of war. We all understand military conflict is war, but there's also Cold War. And Cold War is fought through soft power, where you have political machinations, negotiations, where the diplomats and the business, private industries all support. So we understand there is Cold War, there is the intelligence war. We understand there's proxy war, where like what's going on in Africa right now, where we think it's an African decolonial uprising. But to me, if it walked like a proxy war duck, if it talk like a proxy war duck, if it quacks like a proxy war duck, it's a proxy war. Anyway, I want to stay out of trouble. But race war is very real in the United States. Someone just said in the comments, race, quote unquote, race war. Race war is not real. And let me tell you why there is no. First of all, you can't speak about the coming of a race war. You cannot speak about race war is going to happen. If they don't stop, it's going to cause a race war. Going to cause a race war. Can't call it, because race war is the perpetual permanent state of the United States. Since Plymouth Rock fell on us, the United States has had an ongoing, unrelenting race war. That war has been fought with weapons. It has been what they call military overt warfare. It has been an overt open attack. There has been covert warfare. There has been intellectual, psychological, biochemical, social, cultural warfare. People who identify as white or European or Anglo-Saxon, the white people in the United States have been in unrelenting perpetual warfare, race war, since they first landed on the shores of the so-called New World, since they reached the Dark Continent. The white global minority, in order to take power and to sustain power and to have complete control over the resources of a non-white world, they have to take a permanent stance of war. If the United States ever ended race war, the white minority would be immediately overwhelmed. White liberals, white conservatives, white racists, and white multiculturalists, white people understand this. They won't admit it, they won't acknowledge it, but they understand it. Dr. Amos Wilson said, in order for a world where the minority of the people who have the least amount of resources to have the maximum amount of wealth and have the maximum amount of power, in order to make the world upside down, in order for the world to be in such an unnatural, imbalanced state, you have to be in a perpetual state of warfare. Now, Black people don't understand this. We refuse to acknowledge this. We refuse to act accordingly to this position. To the European, peace is a time of preparation. For Africans, a peace is a time to reconstruct, to heal, to renew. Peace is something you sustain. For them, peace is something you endure until the next conflict. Now, I know people are like, oh, racing, many liberals or minds are racing for the minute examples, trying to find the warmongering African dictator and find the peace-loving, non-violent white man to say, oh, despite decades, centuries of recorded history, despite the material reality of the present world, despite fucking reality, I'm going to find that individual antidotal exception to this reality that I can use to relieve my own psychic pain, my own psychological pain of acknowledging the world is real. Europeans have no justification, have no right, have no legitimate rationale, justification for the level of power and resources that they control. They took the power not through genius, not through just competition, not through cooperation, not through volunteerism. The world was shaped that we live in today, the Western hegemony and capitalism, through genocide, conquest, warfare. And not only was it taken that way, it is sustained that way. So it is absurd for any person of African or non-European descent to speak of race war being a thing that can happen or that will happen down the road or that is confronting us. Race war is what we were born into. It is what your ancestors were born into. Race war has been ongoing, unrelenting, to the point that it is like there's an old saying, the last one to notice the water is the fish. When you are so submerged in something, it is your reality. It is your reality. And we always misinterpret when Europeans change up their methods, when they change up their strategies, we think it is a change of heart. Dale Jones, I say this all the time, when Europeans loosen up to get a tighter grip. I don't know if you've ever played a sport, or me, I used to cut firewood a lot. And you always have to adjust your grip. After every swing, you adjust your grip. Because when you have that impact, it'll slip forward, you'll choke up a bit. If you do any type of work, impact work or something with your hands, you'll notice a lot of times you'll take off the gloves and crack your knuckles, and then you get back at it. That's called loosening up to get a tighter grip. And we look at that loosening up as a change. So the Europeans say, well, we're going to have colonialism, imperialism, slavery. And then we say, well, let's abolish slavery. Oh, Lord, it's a new day. And then they got Jim Crow. And they were like, oh, you know what? We're going to repeal Jim Crow. We're going to repeal Jim Crow. We're going to implement laws, hate crime laws. And we're like, oh, happy day. We're going to integrate. We got a black president. Oh, happy day. They abolished slavery. They did not abolish their desire and their intention to have absolute control of the resources and to militarily and economically dominate the world. Who gives a fuck how they do it? Whether they do it through slavery or they do it through employment, where they do it through segregation, or they do it through racial integration, where they do it through conservatism, exclusive conservatism, or where they do it through integrationist liberalism, where they do it through secular governance, or whether they do it through theocratic governance. What is the fucking underlying constant? We will dominate, whether it is a primitive world, whether it is a modern world. whether it is a agricultural economy, whether it is a high-tech service economy, whatever the fuck it is, wherever the fuck it is, we will not only dominate it, we will reserve for ourselves the exclusive capacity to destroy it. So we don't understand. It pains me to hear about black people talk about, oh, they're going to start a race war, or here comes a race war, or a race war going to end up happening. And when you standing knee deep, neck deep in fucking race war, but it's not a race war. Now I spend all this time speaking about race war, and now I have to tell you, I kind of wish it was a war, because a war is a conflict between two armed factions. And both armed factions have their own formations, they have their weapons, they have their techniques, they have their chain of command. But importantly, what distinguishes two factions is identity and agenda. We don't have an agenda. You can't be at war if you don't have a side. So the problem is, this is not a war. What it is, it's a one-sided war. What do you call a one-sided war? What do you call when one side is organized and determined and deliberate in their attack against a group that is not organized, is not only not attacking, but not counterattacking, and doesn't even have the proper defenses erected, that doesn't even understand what's happening? I think that's good. Namdi said a slaughter. I've got a few terms for it. A slaughter, an onslaught, an atrocity. It could be called, but I choose to rest on atrocity. When one group, whether it is a nation, whether it is a race, whether it is a religion, whatever that group, identifiable group is, takes up an aggressive stance to attack another group, and that group is either not aware or not capable or not willing to fight, that's an atrocity. It's an invasion. There was no Iraq war. The Iraqis were never at war with the United States. It was the Iraqi invasion. There was no Afghan war. It was the Afghan invasion. There's no war in Israel. There's no Israel-Palestinian war. It's a Zionist genocidal occupation and invasion. There was no Vietnam War. The Vietnamese people were not at war with the United States. They had no agenda for conquering U.S. territory. They had no agenda for displacing, overthrowing, or transforming the U.S. government or economy. They had no agenda for unlawfully taking the resources that were already unlawfully taken from the United States. That was the Vietnam invasion. The Panama, I think Panama is one of the few so-called wars. Some people tried to call it the Panama War, but it just wouldn't stick. So they called it the Panama invasion. There was no Panama War. In fact, the vast majority of these wars are not wars. They are slaughters, they are atrocities, they are onslaughts, they are invasions. Now, the Axis versus the empire of that world war, the Western European nations versus the other Western Europe, that was a war. Germany wanted Lebensraum. The United States and Western Europe were seeking to maintain their unjust hold. These were two evil empires. There was no fucking good guy. The United States had a history and had an ongoing campaign of genocide. Hitler had a history and an ongoing campaign of genocide. Hitler's only problem, I swear to you, if Hitler had embarked on his campaign in the 1700s, like the United States did, or if the United States embarked on its campaign in the 1930s and 40s, like Hitler did, Hitler's only problem was his fucking timing. And I ain't no fucking coon ass Kanye West. I fucking hate Hitler. My only problem with Hitler is that he took himself out. I wish Hitler had gone out like Mussolini. I hate Hitler. I hate fascist. I hate fucking racist. But guess what? I don't just hate foreign racist. I hate the homegrown racist too. I hate the homegrown genocide. How the hell can I be mad at the German genocide and give a pass to the American genocide? So all I'm saying is, from a Western perspective, Hitler was just mad late. You know, Hitler tried to do what the United States did. Hitler didn't just have death camps and death marches. The United States had death camps and death marches. Hitler had slave labor in the factories. And you Americans were like, listen, you can't do death camps with poison gas. You got to do death camps with toxic blankets. You're using gas when we use smallpox, so we aren't as bad as you. You send a death march. You use trains for your death march. We had the Trail of Tears. We made these people walk to their death as opposed to putting them on trains. We had them enslaved in the field. You got them enslaved in factories. We called our war Manifest Destiny. We called our genocidal campaign Manifest Destiny. You called your genocide campaign Lebensstrom. Big difference. Oh, don't get me started on Churchill, another man who, until the bombs started dropping on the UK, was a big fan of genocide. A big fan of genocide in India. And Tanzania, South Africa. But I digress. Motherfucking gress. All I'm saying is race war is real. It's a thing and it's happening. It is an ongoing thing. And in fact, race war, the conscious and deliberate subversion, attack, weakening, exploitation, and murder of non-white people is essential for white domination of the world. And if white people stopped engaging in race war, communism would take over Eastern Europe, socialism and African nationalism, all the things that we've been taught to fear would happen overnight. So you can't have white hegemony and capitalism without race war. Now, the early European historians, early European strategists, early European philosophers, they were honest about this. They were honest. But now you can't, it's impolite. It's impolite. It's crazy talk. But yes, and that's a big problem with black people. That's a big problem with black freedom fighters. We are fighting for freedom. They are fighting for conquest. We are not fighting for conquest. We are fighting for freedom. So even if we get freedom, how do you defeat conquest? You can't defeat conquest through securing freedom. I'm sorry. I wish that were true. You got black people out here right now today that's like, I'm living my truth. I'ma just live in peace. I'ma be at peace. Like it's some individual personal thing. As if the toxic motherfucking pollution. I'm sure people living on contaminated land, radioactive, lead contaminated, coltan, dioxin, mercury, all around you. Like, listen, I'm not gonna let nothing interfere with my peace. Fuck Tariq Ali. Somebody, I'm gonna stop. Let me stop looking at the comments. Let me tell you something though, Sherry. If you can love a man that says slavery, I quote, Tariq Nasheed said, slavery was better for black women than it was for black men. Because if a black woman wanted something from the master, she could just give up some pussy and get whatever she wanted from master, where the black man didn't have that option. So any man that could talk in such a way about our ancestors, despite all the other offenses this motherfucker has engaged in, for you to be able to love somebody like that, you must not love yourself or your people. So fuck Tariq. Did you say Tariq Nasheed? Wait, did I read that right? Tariq Ali. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought you said Tariq Nasheed. I apologize, but he gave me an opportunity to hate on Tariq Ali. Yeah, shout out to Tariq Nasheed. These Muslims names for black folks, man. I don't like Muslim name for black folks. I mean, if you're gonna name yourself Ali, why not just call yourself Bob? Why not just call yourself Jacob? I mean, why do we in the West think that Islamic names mean anything? But I'm illiterate. I got these glasses on and I can't even see. I'm reading what I want to see. I don't know why I thought that. I apologize. I put it up on the screen. I see Tariq. But anyway, yeah, shout out to Tariq Ali and shout out to Dr. Gerald Horn. No disrespect. I read Tariq Nasheed for somebody else had put Tariq Nasheed in the comments, and I was just thinking that, like, fuck that dude. Sorry, Sherry. I give you my sincerest direct apology to Sister Sherry. You said Tariq Ali, not Tariq Nasheed. Anyway, where was I? Class war. Am I done talking about race war? Race war. Okay, race war. Race war is real and it's ongoing. And I was talking about if we are fighting for freedom and they are fighting for conquest. You know, that's like literally struggling to heal yourself while someone is wounding you. So freedom, we've interpreted incorrectly, is access and opportunities within the systems and institutions that exist. We want to elevate and fully participate freely within the hierarchy and the structures of this society. So even when we win, we fucking lose. Even when we get black billionaires, even when we got black banks, and even when we got black billionaires, and even when we got a black president, we sit around confused like shit ain't getting better. We got everything we integrated into the schools. Up until 2 weeks ago, we was in Harvard. The fuck? I wish Skipp was here because I'm saying some things, man. I need my regulator. I'm saying some things I don't have to say. So if y'all don't like today, if I'm going too deep and I'm taking it too far, blame Skipp. He ain't here. He said he'd be here, and I don't blame him for not being here. He has obligations above and beyond. He is a rap star after all. So I ain't mad at Skipp. He's out doing work on behalf of the people. He and his significant other, his partner, they doing great things for the youth. And I mean, he's in Mississippi, so that's all I got to say. Y'all think Chicago is bad. Y'all think the South Side is bad. Check out, Mississippi. So he's down there holding it down, doing good work. So I ain't going to be mad at him because he's got many obligations. But anyway, let me wrap up class war so I can move on to race. Let me wrap up race war so I can move on to civil and class. And I'm not saying these are the only 3 types of war in the United States. I'm just saying they're the ones we discussed. Race war is real. It's ongoing. And we are fighting the wrong conflict and we're seeking the wrong objectives. You cannot make peace at a people who are in perpetual warfare. You cannot make peace with a people who are adhere to perpetual and total warfare. And even it's kind of funny. In all these conflicts, white folks, they tell us the truth. I love these people who act like there's some hidden cabal, some conspiracy. And a lot of these people who pretend like there's some hidden knowledge, they're trying to exploit you. Oh, there's an underground Illuminati. You don't know about this. The shit, it's all out there. They write the shit down. I mean, if I can't say nothing else about the Western imperialists, they're fucking thorough record keepers. And the reason they're such good record keepers is because all the capitalistic conspiracy, all the capitalists, all the elites, they don't trust each other. Because they know they're fucking scumbags. Y'all might sit back and look at Elon Musk and be like, he's a genius. But other elites know what the fuck he is. All these dumbass Hicks and Uncle Toms that love Trump. All y'all who look at the elites and look at rich people and be like, rich people are brilliant and they're moral and they're hardworking. And I remember this thing was going around about listing the qualities and class and the characteristics of a rich person. And rich people are married and they're in stable marriages. They go to church and all these things for rich people. And poor people was passing this list around, seeing how many of the millionaire characteristics that they had. Well, I'm married. I go to church. We found that we did a study of 25 multimillionaires, and we found these are characteristics of the 25 millionaires. And you looking at that motherfucking list, trying to see how many of those qualities you have. You mark ass trick. But the true elites understand this is a cutthroat parasite. I'm a cutthroat parasite. So let's write everything down. Let's keep good records. So if you ever wonder why all the way back to the British East India Company, while all these people's crimes, I know, shout out to Brother Cam and all these other brothers out here seeking reparations. They're looking and they're fine. They're trying to struggle to destroy the records. But the reason that the Western capitalist country keeps such good records is because they don't trust each other. They know they're all parasites. You got whole industries that are nothing but whole professions that is nothing but keeping record and keeping track of other white folks on behalf of other white folks. But I digress. Let me just say this. We've been fighting for the wrong shit. Sometimes we use the absolute wrong tactics, sometimes. But we cannot fight for justice. We cannot fight for freedom. We can't fight for separation. Oh, get away from them. Let's move back to Africa. We can't fight for integration. We have to count. The only way to counter conquest is with conquest. If we're not fighting to overthrow the systems and institutions of white hegemony and capitalism, to dismantle, destroy, and disperse their weapons, it is not enough to ask them to stop attacking us. We have to remove their capacity to attack us. It is a waste of our time and effort to try to convince them to stop being racist. We have to remove their capacity to carry out their racism. And if we can't end their capacity to do racism and to act out their race war, we at least have to relinquish and destroy our vulnerabilities. Why are we so vulnerable to them? And how do we end the vulnerability? But yes, race war is real and we don't recognize it. And when we see black folks kicking ass in Alabama, or we see some white militia or some Proud Boys or some other uprising, we think, oh no, the race war might start any day now. You can't start something that's been in motion for centuries. You live under race war. And the only way, and I was going to say this, what they say, what they teach us, mutually assured destruction. That's what they say. The only way that Europeans have told us, this is what they say, the only way we can get to a state of what they call détente, or a state of what they identify as peace, is if the people they wish to do aggression against have equal capacity and will to kill them as you do. That's why the United States, no matter what they say, no matter how many weapons they send to Ukraine, they say, we have no intention of bombing Russian territories. We have no intention of putting U.S. military in Russian territory. We will not, because Russia has reached a state of mad, mutually assured destruction with the United States. Same thing with China. That's it. They don't respect sovereignty. They don't respect the laws. They don't respect international treaties. They don't respect their own fucking treaties. They don't respect the laws they fucking wrote. The only thing they've ever respected. But you also know when you reach that state of mutually assured destruction, you understand they're at peace. And what is peace? Peace is time to prepare for war. Peace is a time where we're not actively at war. It's when we are gathering up the intelligence, the resources, and capacity to do war. And if I can't attack you directly, I will attack you indirectly. If I can't attack you militarily, I will attack you academically, psychologically, in terms of resources. This is the state of the world. And I know people don't want to acknowledge this state of the world because I want to watch ball chasers. I want to watch millionaire ball chasers win championships and trophies. And I want to wear their jerseys and their sneakers. I want to, go to Pound Town. And I'm not saying don't do that. Life is short, and I'm telling you, there is no afterlife. There is no life eternal. You will not receive your rewards in heaven. Ain't no virgins waiting for you in the sky. So I think that everyone, especially revolutionaries, should enjoy their lives. Find things that entertain you. Find things that stimulate you. Find things that bring you joy, and find things that you get off on. But those things should not be distractions or escapes. Those things should be recuperation. Those things, the things that you enjoy, the company that you keep, should be about restoration, restoring you to return and to engage in the struggle. So you don't need escape from the struggle. You need rejuvenation to continue the struggle. So let's move on to class war. Class war is literally the one of the few wars that the United States does not want to engage in. The United States is a war-oriented country, but the United States does everything in its power to avoid class war. Class war, from my point of view, is one of the most justified and necessary forms of war. The United States has, from its beginning, the United States was born out of a classist society, the British monarchy, and the United States was founded not by nobles, but by merchants. You know, as Dale Jones said, the United States is a criminal enterprise founded by a bunch of criminals. So the mercantile class founded this country, and they understood that a nobility is a liability in the modern world. In this new world, they wanted to get rid of because they were not of noble blood. And so all the thing these white folks did, the so-called founding fathers, the founding rapists, the founding genociders, the founding murderers, the founding thieves, y'all can call them founding fathers. The only thing they did differently is they switched from a blood nobility, meaning you were noble through blood, to a landed gentry, meaning what made you noble or what made you elite was not your father, who your father's father was. What made you elite was how much money you got. But everything else was the same. The landed gentry reserved for themselves rights that were not allowed to the unlanded. You know, so it used to be, if you wanted to participate in governance, you had to demonstrate that you had noble blood, noble lineage. In the new world, if you wanted to participate in governance, you had to demonstrate that you had land, you had wealth, you had money. So they went from a blood nobility to a landed gentry. And now, believe it or not, the United States has returned to a blood nobility. It's still, because now wealth is passed down because of public policy. The elite are able to concentrate wealth over generations through policy. The ability to concentrate wealth over generations was hampered from time to time through regulatory policy, taxation policy, and redistributive policies in order to preserve democracy and all that. It's a bunch of interesting, but shit we can't really get into. But all I'm saying is that the United States has very distinct classes, but the United States has next to no class consciousness. My wife, when she would teach her class, one of her classes, I don't know which one. I don't stay. She stay on my business. I try to stay on hers. My wife would teach this class, and she would walk into this one particular class. I think it was a class she taught on the meaning of difference or something. And she would ask them, I want to find out something. How many people in this room would classify themselves as middle class? Just every hand would go up. And then as she would define the parameters of each class, she found that the wealthy students who were rich defined themselves as middle class. There were virtually hardly ever any middle class students in there. And the poor students defined themselves as middle class. Just the fact that I'm in university, I must be middle class, and you dead broke. So people can't even have class consciousness because most people don't even know what class they are. And it's really weird because the United States, as modern countries go, has the greatest level of class rigidity of any so-called Western or developed nation in the world and in history, industrial nation. Class rigidity means the class you're born into is the class you'll die in. But through intensive indoctrination and misinterpreting the nature of the economy, the nature of wealth, through misinterpretation, people have defined themselves in classes that they're not even close to. But class rigidity, back to class rigidity, people, what else saying? Class rigidity. Oh, class rigidity means the class you were born into is the class you will die in. Class that you were born into is the class you were dying in. But many people believe no matter where they were born, because they listen to Jay-Z's line, Uncle Tom, race trader Jay-Z, the race trader Ice Cube, they look at these anomalies, these economic, social anomalies, and believe they are the rule or the standard. So they believe that, oh, I was born broke, but I'm going to break the family curse. I'm going to break the family curse. But even though, by and large, in the black business, like how are you going to fucking base the progress of our race? Even white businesses fail. Upwards of 90% of all white businesses fail. So how are you going to base the empowerment and upliftment of your race on something that has more than a 90% fail rate? Shut the fuck up about these black businesses. If you're a black business owner, bless your heart. It is something that, if it's your passion, something that interests you, something that affords you a level of stability and comfort, bless your heart. But stop passing off black businesses as something that is our collective salvation, because it's not. I don't mind people having black businesses. I have a great problem with people misinterpreting and misrepresenting the power and potential of black businesses. God damn it. So anyway, there's very little class consciousness in this country amongst black people and amongst whites. Even worse, class consciousness is lowest amongst the white masses. The white masses believe even when they are impoverished, that they are the middle class. And when politicians say we must help the middle class, we must save the middle class, we must serve the middle class, and every white person, even a toothless meth head in a leaky, moldy trailer, is like, yeah, what he's talking about me? Yeah. So, class warfare in the United States amongst the white majority and the non-white minorities, class consciousness is something that needs to be cultivated, something that needs to be reinforced, and something that needs to be articulated amongst all communities. Class consciousness and the cultivation and implementation of race warfare should be an objective and a goal. As you seek racial, black power, black liberation, black sovereignty, black nationalism, if within your black agenda there is not a class consciousness, a class agenda, and class antagonism, if you lack that, what's going to happen is what happened in Haiti, what happened in Zimbabwe, what happened in Congo, what happened everywhere where black people rose up and fought for power, fought concessions. All of the concessions, all of the benefits of what the masses struggle for get concentrated in the hands of Bill Cosby, Oprah Winfrey, Obama. I know personally black millionaires. I've sat across from them. I've listened to them talk. I've sat in a corner and listened to them discuss. And these millionaire black people really believe my sacrifice, my education, my struggle, my brilliance is what allowed me to get here. It wasn't the lynchings. It wasn't the fire hoses and the attack dogs and the assassinations and the COINTELPRO and the protests and the resistance and the riots. Nope, it's just my brilliant black brain, personally individual. So hard. So any black struggle that does not have a component of class consciousness and class antagonism will default to all the benefits won by black people being concentrated in the hands of a few race traders. And those race traders who profited the most from black struggle will ally with the white elites to maintain the unjust status quo. How do you look up to Jay-Z? Any black person, if you look at a black person or a black family and say, let's say there is a worldwide black revolution and a just redistribution of resources, would that individual or that family benefit or decline? Would they raise up or decline? And if they would decline, you have to look at them in a class hostility. Every single elite black, every single affluent black, every single wealthy black person, if they are not consciously and deliberately engaged in class suicide, we can't count them amongst us. Stop that. I'm rooting for everybody black. Stop dancing in the street. If you are fool, or no, let me recenter. If you go see Beyonce, be a Beyonce fan. Enjoy Beyonce's music. Enjoy the spectacle. Lord knows, if there was some millionaire entertainer, most of the artists I like, they're maybe one or two steps up better than me. They're still amongst the working class people, working class art. They're not. I don't like. If there's a celebrity I like, let me think. Is there a celebrity that I like? Most of the artists that I really like are not really doing it like that. How much money Delta Funky? How much money Hieroglyphics got? Are they private jetting? Are they business men or a businessman? Anyway, all I'm saying is we should encourage, if you find a white person, a white Antifa, white Marxist, a white anarchist, if you find a white person who is class conscious and engaged within his community, within his race, in class antagonism and trying to cultivate class consciousness, you should say, hey, high five, white boy, go. Yeah, good for you. We should encourage that in all communities, amongst all communities within our own. And when we find it, we hold solidarity. Shout out to the white anarchists. Shout out to the true Chinese communists who still hold, or to the Chinese Maoist. Shout out to the Palestinians. Shout out to any group that has class consciousness and engaged in class struggle along with their other struggle. It frightens me how devoid so many black organizations and black ideologies and black groups and black agendas are devoid of class. And the best thing they want to do is try to elevate as many black people as they can to upper class. And believe you me, I ain't got no problem with black people living good. I'm one of them vicarious black people. I see a black person doing good and I know they're not a traitor. I know they're not a parasite, and I see a black person doing good. I'm doing good. I hope they win. I hear something good. Headline, lottery winner or some shit. I hear a headline that's positive. I'm like, oh, I hope they black. I hear a headline that's negative. Story at 8. I'm like, I hope they ain't black if it's bad. And I hope they is black if it's good. I understand that. I think we should maintain that. I think that is a good thing. But there's a level. It's a difference between doing good, having a level of stability, having opportunities, and being a motherfucking parasite. Once you get to a certain level, I believe in a maximum wage. Fuck a minimum wage. I believe in a maximum wage. Once you cross a certain threshold, and when your agenda aligns more with the DuPonts, with the Vanderbilts than they do with the people them, I have to look at you with a great level of skepticism and antagonism. But I digress. So that's class warfare. We should seek to cultivate class consciousness for the deliberate purposes of engaging in unrelenting class warfare. Now, remember when I talked about one-sided, these invasions, these atrocities, these slaughters. The United States has had class warfare. Just because there's no class consciousness. Well, there used to be. I mean, you go and read labor struggle. Go read the history of the international, the IWW, the Wobblies. Go read. The United States had the most violent labor struggle. Most of the global holidays, May Day, most of the most militant and aggressive labor ideologies and movements were born here in the United States. We're born here. So I'm not saying it was never here. I'm just saying it ain't here now. I don't want some geek, some nerdy history geek come, well, actually, the United States did have class consciousness. Yes, I acknowledge. Shout out the anarcho-syndicalists. Yes, the fucking pinker. COINTELPRO did not start in the 60s. The COINTELPRO did not start with Garvey. The first COINTELPRO programs and the public-private partnerships for the subversion of struggles was against the black and white, was the labor struggle. So I agree. Yes, the labor, the mill workers, the miners, the back in the lumber industry used to be really big. The lumber workers, the agricultural struggles. Yes, there was a time of magnificent, and that's the only reason we have child labor restrictions, OSHA laws, they call 8-hour workday, paid what little bit we have. Capitalism ain't giving you shit. These people literally, oh yeah, I'm able to make, I get a good paying job, I get 2 weeks vacation, I got medical insurance, I got an 8-hour workday, and if I go over 40 hours a week, I get paid time and a half. And it's people out here with all these work benefits, the few people who still got all that shit. I used to have that. I was a union worker. They really believe that's a result of capitalism. Everything as a worker that you have that makes your life livable in this system is a result of work fighting against capitalism, not as a result of the benevolence of capitalism. But I said class war is absent. We need to bring about class war within the United States and across the globe, within Black labor struggles, within Black militant struggles, within Black consciousness, within Black cultural struggles. We need to bring about, and I'm so sick of every time there's some Black gathering, it's a bunch of Black motherfucking millionaires on the list, headlining Steve Harvey and all these multimillionaire Negroes leading up positive. It ain't positive Black, god damn it. Okay, class war, a good thing. Class war justified. Class war necessary. Class consciousness and class antagonism are the precursors to class war. So work unrelentingly to bring about class consciousness in your community, wherever you're organizing, whoever, bring about class consciousness, feed class antagonism, and try to mobilize for class war. Now, the final war is civil war. You hear a lot of talk about civil war. I'm trying to do this quick because I got a call I need to return. And I'm going to try to do this quick. And then I'm going to open it up. And then we're going to have a good evening. I'm just going to give up on Skipp. Civil war. Everybody talk about, oh, it's a civil war. Here's my doubts about civil war. What I understand about civil war is generally most civil wars are two elite factions when there's a fracture amongst the elites. Like the U.S. Civil War, you had the investor class in the North and the plantation owner class in the South. When there is a fracture amongst the elites, that's when you tend to have a civil war. At least in the West, in so-called developed nations. I don't like these terms. I actually was very comfortable with first world, third world, fourth world, second world. But then they say the developing nations, and then they say the global South, the global North. They keep changing. The motherfucking conditions don't change, but we keep renaming shit. Homeless, unhoused, the fuck? Well, I don't know. I didn't go very far in school, so I don't understand, man. The nomenclature. I appreciate. No, let me not front. I did get far in school. And I understand and appreciate nomenclature. I'm probably the only person in the whole world that supports political correctness. I think it is an appropriate and healthy thing. Oh, anti-PC. PC is a good thing. But I just can't accept it at face value. If you want to change the nomenclature, you got to give me a reason. But I'd much rather change the reality, the material conditions, than change the title. But I digress. I don't see a civil war coming, and various factions outside of the state going at each other, and there are very, especially amongst the white nationalist, the fascist, the militia movement, Timothy McVeigh. You have a lot of white people committing terrorist acts and thinking that will mobilize the white masses. You have the Bundys, who are very influential family, a bunch of criminals and welfare queens and kings of welfare, public land theft, living off of public resources. You have a lot of those people, but the only way I would really believe that civil war is coming to the United States is if I could see identified, like, let's say you have the oil industries and the oil executives and the multinational corporations and over oil, and let's say like the tech industry, the tech billionaires, and the tech billionaires start to get heavily invested into renewable energy, wind, solar, geothermal, and they start to really supplant the coal and fossil fuel oil, and they start to split, that shit can lead to a civil war. Like you had the agriculturalist in the South and the financier class, Wall Street in the Northeast. That's and yes, they were fighting over slavery, not because they loved black people. It's because the North was like, listen, this is an antiquated system for exploiting labor. Chattel slavery is obsolete. The British have abolished it. The French have abolished it. All of the pre-industrial societies and the advanced imperialist societies have moved away from chattel slavery, and they're going into a new method of oppression. We're not ending oppression. We just want a new method and technique. And they was like, no, the old method is fine. So most civil wars are elite factions that have engaged in basically agency capture. There are factions of the economy, the private industry, that have an immense amount of control over the government factions that are there to regulate them. So let's say you have the oil companies have very close ties with the military. And not only do they have very close ties with the military, they have certain legislatures in their pockets. Then you have the tech bros. And the tech bros are very cozy with the intelligence apparatus, the CIA, the FBI, because they collect information, woo, 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 and they have their own senators and congressmen and judiciary, and they have this. And so they start to do battle for whatever reason. And these factions start to take to the street. And then you have on social media, these social media companies with their algorithms will start to cultivate antagonisms. And antagonism not against minorities. When you see white people online talking about migrants, talking about women, these females, when you the black people doing all the crimes, the black people robbing the store, when you see whites online attacking other invulnerable people, that's not a civil war. When you start seeing white people talk about industries, when you see white masses, these militia, these homosexuals start talking about industries, and they're being targeted by one group of elites to attack another group of elites. As long as the elites are having the white fodder, the cannon fodder of the white masses attack and target vulnerable people, scapegoats, there's not really a civil war on the horizon. But when you start to see real facts, and a lot of times you still see Disney Corporation. Oh, Disney is at war with Ron DeSantis. But you'll find that Disney's campaign contributions, they still split between Democrat and Republican. Or someone say, oh, wait a minute. They just attacked Bud Light, and they were talking about Bud Light is helping the transgender agenda. So they had boycotted Bud Light, and Kid Rock is shooting up the thing with the machine gun. But you also notice Bud Light gives more money to conservative causes and conservative politicians than liberal. So there are some times where false alarms, I guess, where you would think that it looked like, well, the conservatives are boycotting Disney, or the conservatives are shooting up cans of Bud Light, as opposed to attacking certain industries. And white people attacking the government don't mean shit. White people are spoiled. White people hate the government the most, and they get the most from governments. The government has spoiled white people. You look at the white masses, the biggest recipients of set-asides, the biggest recipients of affirmative actions, the biggest recipients of welfare, the biggest recipients of subsidies. White folks get the most from the government, and they, in their own minds, believe they've gotten the least. They get considerations on every level, from school entry to job application to appointments. They get it all. They get the most. And I don't know if you know families that favor one child or another. The favored child always think they get the least. So this Civil War thing, there are a lot of symptoms of Civil War. But at the core, if you look at white folks shooting up cans of Bud Lights, or white folks trying to boycott, and yes, it's white folks. I'm sorry, black people, we ain't about to provoke no Civil War. We in the Civil War, we were the prize. White folks were fighting. We were the trophy. White folks were fighting over what to do with us. So any black person like, yeah, we're gonna start a civil war. When us few 30 million black people against them 30 million, no. It's just this. If there's going to be a civil war in the United States, it's going to be a white faction versus a white faction. And what's really stupid about that, there will be black people at the forefront, some old Crispus addicts, Negroes. We got a lot of black people, and don't just think we're all gonna fight on the right side. You right now, you got the irritated genie. He sent me a cease and desist letter, crying. But I'm not saying nothing that's not part of the public record. But he's going on tour with David Duke. So there will be a lot of black people fighting on the side of the KKK, skinheads, Christian nationalist, fascist Zionists. Ice Cube is a card carrying Zionist. Met with Tucker Carlson. So there will be, Kanye ain't gonna be the only Negro fighting on the sides of the Nazis. You know. Anyway. And don't tell me, oh, Kanye got mental illness, because I got relatives, I know people related to me or not that have severe mental illnesses, have been institutionalized against their own will. I know a dude, a brother who spent 17 years literally in an asylum. He committed a crime, and he was found not guilty by reason of insanity, and they locked him up for almost 20 years. And one thing I know is mental illness does not make you a Nazi. I know someone very close to me who has suffered with addiction and mental illness, and they one of the most pro-black people. They are filled with black pride. They are have a great love for their race. They have a great resentment. And even this person that I'm talking to was living in the middle of Trump country, and they put in their yard anti-Trump signs, anti-MAGA. And this is a person, like I said, suffered as long as I've known them with mental health and addiction. And I went to their house, and it was, and the rednecks would drive by their house screaming racial slurs and shoot at their house. Being mentally ill does not qualify you or excuse you to being, does not make you or excuse you from being a self-hating race traitor. You can be mentally ill and a race traitor, or you can be sane and a race traitor, but you're a race traitor, and you can't tell me it's the mental illness. Because I know way too many pro-black, self-loving, racially loyal, African-centered even, people who struggle with mental illness. Anyway, I digress. So I hear a lot of talk about civil war. People throw it around, and the people, Trump indictment, if Trump is arrested, it's going to be a civil war. Like I said, unless you see, not Democrats and Republicans, they will be, the Democratic and Republican parties are, again, tools and instruments of the truly elites. So most civil wars in developed nations are conflicts between elite factions. Many civil wars in the non-developed nations are conflict and proxy wars of elite factions. And by and large, even though there is division and conflict amongst the elites, most of their elites, they settle at the negotiation table. Generally, they are able to not cross over the tech industry, the oil industries, weapons manufacturing, resource extraction, mining industry, shipping industry, these big major capitalist industries that belong to certain small number of what they call institutional investors, venture capitalists. They tend, even though they're bumping heads, even though you have some that are liberals and some that are conservative, by and large, they see their position as fixed and their power as not being threatened by the lower classes or by their rivals. And most of their settlements are settled in boardrooms. But if the boardroom starts to break down, I think so. Even though there's a lot of civil unrest and civil conflict and civil strife, as far as a full-scale civil war in the United States, I don't see it happening now, and I don't see it on the horizon. But again, we could all go to bed, and I wake up tomorrow like, oh shit, something has happened. Because the climate, the physical climate and the political climate is changing so rapidly at this particular arc in history. The moment I see it coming, I'll be the first to call it out. Anyway, that's it. Let me share this link. If you want to get down, if you have questions, comments, criticisms, please share them. and we're gonna try to get out of here by I think this is the share thing. We're gonna try to get up out of here by 9 o'clock. Let me acknowledge the members. Shout out to the members. It does my heart good to see uh, Black Power Media growing. Thank you, Namdi. You are extremely generous for your contributions. What do you say here? The book Michael Bradley, Iceman's Inheritance. He especially talks about how Western culture is a destructive culture and how Europeans will shoot their self in their own head to maintain it. Yes, that's absolutely. My favorite quote from Michael Bradley is, "It is not intelligence. It is not what do you say? It's not through intelligence. It's not through creativity. It's not through brilliance that um, Europeans have taken over. The only quality that sets Europeans apart from every other race is aggression, hyper temporal aggression. So it is their aggression is the one quality that they have in abundance beyond any other race that they've encountered." Okay, wow, extremely generous tonight. Namdi also states African mind cannot stay in a European system for too long because it becomes corrupt without any filters. And we start to take on characteristics of Europeans, which we are seeing right now, which is not uh, good. It's meant to say, yeah, that's very curious too, because you have white people living amongst black majorities and they don't seem to be impacted the same way. You have the white Afrikaans, you have a white minority in Rhodesia. Now Zimbabwe, you have a white minority in Tanzania, and those white minorities spent decades amongst Africans. You even had white people who came here, and Europeans used to say they went native. You had white people that would go amongst the people of the so-called third world, the global south, and live amongst and be totally shipwrecked or caught lost amongst these people. But they seem to, you know, who knows? Who knows? But yeah, that is a curiosity. But I don't think that when you say European system, well, you didn't say this, so I just want to emphasize what you're saying. Just because it ain't no white folks around you, don't mean it's not a European system. I lived in an all black neighborhood. I went to all black schools. You know, I had to walk. Shoot, in Kansas City, shit, I had to cross the tracks. I lived in a black community in predominantly black schools, black stores, and if it wasn't somebody coming to evict or arrest somebody, I didn't get to see white folks very often, but it was still a European system. European systems do not require white folks to be there, unfortunately. So just because in a lot of African people, born and raised on the African continent, have come up in a European system and they really don't understand that and they think, but I digress. Y'all get it. What and finally these are the thanks Andre, thanks for this episode. Thanks for tuning in and thanks for your contribution. Okay, anybody else? And if I miss your question, comment, or criticism, uh forgive me. I do try to catch them, but the feed kind of, I guess y'all can see the feed if I can see it. It kind of goes. So if I miss you, it's not with intent. Uh, so anyway, if we don't have any questions, we can wrap this up early. Uh, oh, how can I get my 3 credits for this class? Shit, don't try to take these credits. You gonna get expelled. Don't put that on your transcript. They gonna, but you got them. Hey, energetic credits. I'm radiating the credits to you. That's funny. I appreciate it though, because I do think these outlets are valuable. I mean, I think if somebody takes time to sit and listen to me, I should say something worthy of your time. So, you giving me your time and taking time. I appreciate people taking time to hear me out as much as some people appreciate my efforts to share. Would you say the U.S. is a bourgeois dictatorship? I don't think that the United States is a dictatorship. The rule of law does still have some standing in the United States. There are some democratic elements, and the bourgeois does take L's from time to time. Not enough, not often, but would not call the United States form of government a dictatorship. It is an oligarchy, meaning that the elites have undue influence and power in the government, but they don't have exclusive power or absolute power. That's what they're working towards, and we're headed in that way. We're leaning in that direction, but there are still opportunities for grassroots movements. I mean, we tend to focus more on the losses, but there's things that can be achieved within this system through political organizing and advocacy and protest. So no, it's not a dictatorship yet, but just because it's not a dictatorship, the political spectrum does not go from absolute freedom to dictatorship. There are stages. So the United States is closer to dictatorship than to a true democracy, but it's not all the way to dictatorship. United States is an oligarchy, meaning that the people with wealth in this country have undue power within the political system. But let's say Bill Gates. Bill Gates can't just say, okay, I want this thing and have it. So if Bill Gates wants a particular policy or a particular outcome, he still has to work at it. He has to put up money. He has to lobby. He has to, go into the court of public opinion. He has to make donations and funds to public institutions, and you make donations to universities and all that. Dictators don't have to go through all that trouble. A dictator says, listen, this is that. This is the thing. So the fact that the elites still have to go through the rigmarole of giving the appearance of civic engagement and civic policies, and that the politicians have to go, and they do sometimes take losses. They do sometimes not get their way, or they do sometimes get less than what they asked for or have to work. There are pipelines being stopped. There are moratoriums being lifted. So the United States is not a dictatorship. But like I said, just because it's not a dictatorship does not, because a lot of times when I say, well, it's not a dictatorship, you pro-America, you believe in America, like, we don't have to be intellectually lazy, good, bad. We are adults here. We're not toddlers. We're not toddlers. We don't have to live in a world of good, bad. The United States is bad, even though we don't live in a world of good and bad. The United States is bad. I'm just saying, to say it is a dictatorship, living under and struggling under a dictatorship requires a different tactics and strategies. That's the reason why I don't want to call the U.S. a dictatorship. Not because I want to defend the United States or give credit to the United States. But when we say things like, well, the U.S. is a dictatorship, well, we're not conducting ourselves as dictatorship, as though we're fighting. We're not fighting against a dictatorship. We're fighting under a oligarchical kleptocracy. The United States is a kleptocracy. It is an oligarchy. And we have to strategize, organize, and confront that. So it's not that the United States is not bad. It's just that the type of bad that it is. That's why I don't like people say there's no difference between Democrats and Republicans. The reason why is, if you are a Black person living in the United States and you are living under Republican policies, whether that is a local Republican legislature, a local Republican mayor, or a Republican governor, it's much different than living under a Democratic. Not much, but there are some significant differences. And according to how you will organize, the level, the type of political education, the type of political mobilization, and the type of resistance that you will level within those varying factions are different. That's it. That's it. That's the only reason why I say we have to recognize these distinctions. Not because I support the Democrats, because when I tell people the Democrats and the Republicans are not the same, they say, oh, you must be a Democrat. And it's exhausting, really. So the reason why, I'm going to say it one more again, the reason why it is necessary to correctly diagnose the disease, because dictatorship is let's say it's a disease. Not to say that one disease is better than the other. The necessity for proper diagnosis, proper identification is so that we can implement the proper reaction and treatment. So I hope that answers your question. I appreciate that. Well, it's not, but it's not a dictatorial. Neither one of the parties have dictatorial power either. It's just not a dictatorship. It's just not. The Biden is not does not have dictatorial power. The judicial branch does not have dictatorial power. The Congress or the legislator, neither one of the branches have absolute power. I think the executive branch has an enormous amount of power that it got under the war on terror and all that other shit. Now, there is an imbalance. This is not checks and balances. It is extremely warped. But like I said, it just doesn't meet the definition. I know maybe if you're organizing in the United States and you want to be able to say, yeah, this dictatorship, it's easy. Like it makes it may make you feel like, oh, I'm fighting in a dictatorship, but you're not. You're fighting an oligarch. There are oligarchs in this country that have an imbalance of power and an aggressive level of extraction of power. But because this country is fucking big and it's so many layers, you know, but it's not a dictatorship. And I know there are many factions that would love a dictatorship. I mean, you literally have George Bush, everybody mad at Trump, but George Bush is like, it would be so much easier to govern this country if it was a dictatorship. The president said that. He's like, if it was a dictatorship, and a lot of people become president like idiots like George Bush or Trump, and Trump is actually prized. He's learning that it's not a dictatorship. He's learning that quite rapidly. Anyway, any other questions, comments, criticisms? Is it no, it is not a two-party dictatorship. Again, maybe we need to talk more about what a dictatorship actually is. But no, it's not a two-party dictatorship. The formal definition, this is a two-party duopoly. And in a two-party duopoly, that means you have two political parties that control the entire government. So it is a duopoly. But within that duopoly, if you study the two political, if you look at the Republican Party, you saw when they were trying to elect a Speaker of the House, and you have the MAGA faction, you have what they call the mainstream Democrats, you have Mitt Romney, and what's that other piece of shit? What's that guy's name? God damn it. Governor Christie, Chris Christie. You have Chris Christie. So if you look at the Republicans, you look inside, even though all stated platform is there, there's a lot of turmoil in there within that party and a lot of conflicts. The same thing with the Democrats. We all know they serve corporate interests. We all know they seek to maintain the status quo and corporate control, and they serve the interests and speak to the interests of corporations above and all else. You all know that they will fund the military-industrial complex as their main priority. There are certain fixes that overlap certain parties, but there are certain parts where the parties diverge. The two parties that do not hold dictatorial power. No, they do not. Not on a federal level, not on a local level. You know, I live in a Democratic-dominated city, and within the Democratic Party here, people are beating each other up, sending each other to jail. There's a lot of shit going on. The former speaker of the Illinois legislature is headed to prison. You know, in a dictatorship, when the motherfucking party heads go to jail, that's one of yours. If they can be locked up, and they don't, when they go to arrest these people, they don't have to shoot it out. So I'm sorry. You know, you have to, if you actually look at actual dictatorships, you know, go look up Nicolae Ceausescu, you know, or look at Vladimir Putin. If you want to look at dictatorships, I think if you go and look at actual, by definition, dictatorships, I think you'll start to see the distinction. Again, I can't stop people from saying this. I know later. I'm not saying the United States is a good country. I'm not saying it is a proper country. I'm not saying it's a democratic country. I'm not saying I support the United States. I am a captive of this motherfucking country. I am not singing the praises. All I'm saying is it is a bad system. And it is a bad country. But the type of bad it is, I think it's Russia's not a dictatorship. Okay. I don't know what this Russian infatuation is, but I mean, anything anti-American is pro everybody else. I wish that was the case. But anyway, I digress. Look at North Korea. Tell me North Korea is not a dictatorship either. Anyway, any other questions? Somebody made a comment. Russia is not a dictatorship. Putin shares power. Putin does not have absolute authority. Putin is subject to the laws as any other Russian citizen. And he shares powers with other factions. The Duma is the Russian. North Korea is not a dictatorship. Okay. All right. Okay. That's in my assessment. With my master's degree in political policy. Maybe I'm just too institutionalized, but maybe y'all have to tell me. But I'm going to go ahead and say China is democratic. God damn, we just use words. Man. Okay. I think we're going to wrap it up on that note before we start arguing. But I think I can support my positions. Anyway, I appreciate everyone listening. I will holler at and give y'all an update on Skipp. He told me that he would be here later, but, shit happens. That's my brother. I told him I'd hold him down. So it's all good. Thank you for everyone who made contributions to Black Media. Like, share, subscribe, including done all them algorithmic thing. And I appreciate your time, and we will be back. Let me just give y'all a calendar. Won't want to pop up. Oh, so we'll be back September 6th with the next broadcast of The Rational Radicals. This Friday, Earn Your Liberation, 7 a.m. 9 a.m. and then the Bro Diallo show on Q4 Radio live. And if you're not in, you can listen online via the socials, or if you're in town, listen on local radio, Q4.org on Monday. Well, that's that. That's all the announcements. I'll share a link. I got an interview coming up from I got an interview. In Belgium. Okay. I got this Belgian media. This Belgian show. I'll be interviewed by some so-called 1+1 in Belgium. Man. People ask me to do stuff, I just be saying yeah. But anyway, I'll be on Belgian television tomorrow at 4 p.m. my time. What time it'll be in Belgium? Belgian revolutionary, but this is Black Belt. It's Black people everywhere. We just all everywhere. This is the brother that reached out to me from Belgium that wanted to talk about struggles Americans during in the African diaspora. So shout out to the brothers and sisters in Belgium. Looking forward. Thank y'all for listening to me on the Bro Diallo broadcast and Black Power Media. I'm so happy Belgium, our brothers and Black folks in Belgium have reached out, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow night's discussion on one Plus One Media in Belgium. And with that, I wish y'all a good evening, and I will see y'all Friday morning for your liberation, and Monday morning, the Bro Diallo.